So relegation at the first attempt for Ipswich Town, a competitive effort for Ipswich in the Premier League. They're in a lot of games, especially in the first half of last season. But in the end, that jump was a bit too much, wasn't it? Jumping from League One football, as they were playing as recently as the 22-23 campaign, to Premier League football just 2 years later. And probably they didn't have enough transfer windows to evolve the squad to a level that was appropriate for the Premier League. But what they do have is, coming down back to the Championship, is a fantastic Championship squad. That means for the first time for as long as I can remember studying the leagues, Ipswich Town go into a season as one of the favourites, not at League One level, where they had been for a few times, and underachieved in a couple of those seasons, but actually in the Championship. And I think that's absolutely understandable, given that they've got a potentially elite manager in Kieran McKenna, who was linked with some massive jobs this time 12 months ago. But they've also got some absolute top-end Championship players in Alex Palmer, former West Bromwich Albion goalkeeper, Leif Davis, a fantastic left back in the Championship who can really get up and down. As things stand, they've still got Amari Hutchinson in the attacking midfield role. And while they have lost Liam Delap, they've also got very reliable Championship players, as they proved last time round, in the likes of George Hurst, Nathan Broadbent and Connor Chaplin, as well as the top goal scorer from the Championship in recent seasons in Sammy Smodics, and Sam Morsey, of course, the captain, fantastic as well. And so what I'm really curious about is the balance of the quality in this Ipswich Town squad and the damage that can do to the Championship versus the feeling that, you know, having winning back-to-back promotions based on momentum and that winning feeling, whether the wind has been taken out of their sails a little bit by a difficult last 12 months, and whether sometimes Luton Town proved last season that you come down without changing the squad too much after one season in the Premier League, and sometimes it's not quite as easy as you think. So really curious to see what the perspective is from locals at Ipswich Town. This is the Summer Deep Dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. I'm speaking to a fan of each of the 72 clubs across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. So if you want more of that content, you could do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. Delighted to be joined this evening by Richard Woodward and Seb Brown from the excellent Blue Monday podcast on Ipswich Town. Good evening, gents. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm very glad to see both of you. I don't know how glad you are to see me.
Yeah, I'd rather not, mate, if I'm honest. But I think Seb will agree. A year in the Premier League, being the underdog every week, being picked off by teams with far greater resources, and frankly, the pantomime that is VAR. I'm actually quite excited for Championship football, if I'm honest.
Absolutely, yeah. Rich, how what's your feeling about Ipswich Town going into the season? The possibilities that come with a squad of this level of caliber and quality versus, I suppose, the challenges that inevitably come after a relegation.
Yeah, I think the challenges that come after the relegation, as you said, has probably somewhat limited my excitement. I know we are in no excuse territory as a parachute club, and as you mentioned, recruited top end Championship players in across the field as part of our attempt to survive last season. So the building blocks are there. The big news is that Kieran McKenna hasn't yet been poached. Brentford were stalking him for quite some time, but fortunately went down another route. So there is some stability there, but we are losing kind of key players. Certainly Delap, not really a surprise, but leaves us a little bit short up front. And the midfield is an area where there is quite a gap of quality and strength and depth too. Experience and leadership through the likes of Mas Luongo and Cam Burgess is also areas where we need to address. And unlike other teams in the Championship, dare I say Birmingham, we haven't yet been particularly busy in the transfer market, and Town fans are getting a little bit, myself included, a little bit nervous around that. But a double deal is supposed to be on the cards, rumoured today. So movements afoot there, Gab. But yeah, I think it's, as I say, no excuse territory for a parachute team like ours. I think everything is there, but just need to bring in a little few more faces and I'll be a bit more confident.
Yeah, and I wanted to start at the top of the club, Seb, because I think we tend to talk about ownership issues at clubs when something's gone wrong, and often we sometimes can be guilty of taking it for granted when there's really good ownership. So just talk to me about the US owners that are there at Ipswich Town.
The job they've done is incredible. I mean, they bought the club probably at its lowest ebb. You know, we'd had the Marcus Evans era had really tailed off, resulting in the inevitable relegation to League One. It was new, it was fresh. We had Paul Cook in charge, who went out and said, "I'm going to do a demolition man summer," and bought in 20 plus new signings, and it never got going. And we kind of thought, are we just cursed as a club? Are we just cursed somehow? And we're never going to rise to our previous kind of heights. And then obviously they were very smart. They appointed firstly Mark Ashton in that first summer after they took us over in the April. Mark Ashton comes in the summer. He 6 months later identifies Kieran McKenna. They kind of give him full reign. They give Mark Ashton full reign to kind of get on with running the club on a day-to-day basis. He has to report to them obviously with meetings and stuff, but he makes it very clear that he writes the plan. They will challenge him on the plan, but once the plan is agreed, they do not kind of interfere. And what McKenna Ashton with the backing of the US group with their kind of money it's an incredible ride. It's been an amazing 2 years. I know you and Rich were saying that last year was horrible, brutal in a lot of ways, but I can't imagine any Ipswich fan would have changed those back-to-back years at all, because it was a phenomenal journey. And now it's kind of the next phase of that ownership and of that evolution of the squad. Popular players, key players from the double promotion years, like Rich said, Mas Luongo, Cameron Burgess, they are moving on now. So there's going to be new faces coming in. It's a transitional period, but as long as the US backing is there with Ashton in the CEO role, and most importantly McKenna in the dugout, I'll always be, I wouldn't be able to kind of quantify where the limit would be, because they've clearly got incredibly high aspirations of getting back to the Premier League at the first time of asking. As Rich said, we are in no excuse territory. They will want to establish us there. And if we can do that, then as a town fan, the fan base will all be absolutely delighted.
Game changers in name and in nature then. Rich, I'm wondering, do you think how much of the money that's come into the club as a result of that season in the Premier League, especially through TV deals, is going to be reinvested straight into the playing budget? And how much is there a feeling that they're going to give it to the CEO, Mark Ashton, and oversee some of those improvements to the structural side of the club, which I think is equally important?
Yeah, there is investment going on off the field at the training ground, where it was one of these cliches about 20 years ago when players signed for Ipswich. They would always say the training ground is great. And then about 10 years ago, people stopped saying that. And I think certainly the Marcus Evans era that Seb mentioned, things like the training ground, the quality of the stadium and the pitch just deteriorated. And so to Game Changers' credit, they have spent there, and the training ground is the next thing on their target list to expand and improve and enhance that, and give us again the resources to be able to stake a claim in the top flight. I think the budget is going to be there. As Seb mentioned, the ambition of the ownership is there. I think there's an element of amortization of big fees that requires us to do some balancing of books. PSR and FFP is always a bit of a tricky thing to navigate with our rapid trajectory. Certainly that limited our ability to spend last season, but given the likely sums of money that we're going to be talking about for players at championship level, at least, I'd be shocked if there's not a couple of 10 million or so type signings, which actually isn't too uncommon in the rest of the championship this summer. It's been quite a strange one in that I think Birmingham coming in, Wrexham to an extent as well, but even Swansea, I think teams are putting money out there, realizing Norwich are, I think, spending 12 million quid on a Danish striker. I think teams have realized that maybe with the lack of parachute teams making up the championship top six, that perhaps this is the season to go for it. So I think we will spend. The good thing is that we've obviously done a lot of that spending last season, with perhaps more than half an eye in mind on what would happen if we were to be relegated.
Yeah, absolutely. Just finishing off on the off-field side before moving on to Kieran McKenna and the squad, Seb. Is there a lot of trust in Mark Ashton, given the work that he's done over the last 3 or 4 years?
I think there has to be, because they have delivered pretty much every single window. We kind of built the championship squad when we were in League One. The January windows, Premier League season aside, have been incredibly successful for us. We kind of tooled up at League One level for the Championship, bringing in the likes of Nathan Broadhead, George Hurst on loan, who then joined permanently the following summer, Harry Clark, Massimo Luongo. In the promotion season from the Championship, Kiefer Moore comes in to cover George Hurst's injury. Ali Al-Hamadi came in, Jeremy Sarmiento, Lewis Travis to add a bit of, kind of good characters in the background, not necessarily playing that much, but adding to that kind of that character of the squad. And yeah, we have to put our faith in them. A lot of fans, me and Rich did a Blue Monday show on Sunday night, and the general feeling amongst the fan base was we really need a signing because, the last kind of 4 or 5 months saw us win one game at Premier League level. So getting new bodies in just to freshen things up is important. We fly out for a pre-season training camp on Monday to Austria. So I think we both agreed on the Sunday night show that getting 1 or 2 bodies in this week is pretty critical to, cheer the fan base up a little bit, and also more crucially for the preseason preparations. It sounds like that's about to happen. So yet again, you have to put faith in Ashton, in McKenna, in Mark Ashton's mythical, amazing data dashboard, which is locked away behind several doors and keys and vaults. And hopefully they will fill the plugs in the gaps in the squad, and get a few more bodies in before the season starts.
Yeah, absolutely. Kieran McKenna then, Rich, are we talking about him as the greatest Ipswich Town manager since the likes of Bobby Robson and George Burley? Difficult to put him quite in that bracket given, the scale of what those two achieved, but McKenna's not a million miles off.
Thank you for adding the word since. I thought you were going to leave it at best manager ever, and I would be in a really difficult quandary about Robson, Ramsey, Burley, McKenna, etc. Yeah, in the modern era, 100%. I think if he'd kept us up, I've joked about this before. In fact, if you find the last time we spoke, Gab, I probably mentioned the word statue and Kieran McKenna. There's a huge fondness, not only for the way that he communicates with the fan base, but the way that tactically he sets us up. Quite astute. The players clearly buy into it. I think maybe there are some legitimate questions to talk about how we approached last season. Certainly the recruitment, I think in hindsight, we probably would have pivoted in different ways had we known how demanding the league is physically, and whether McKenna is kind of culpable or part of that conversation, I guess is up for debate. Maybe extends to your question to Seb about Mark Ashton and our recruitment. But I think certain choices, decisions, tactical aspects of last season, I think it's difficult to figure out what our chances would have been. I'm pretty certain there's very few permutations of last season where we stay up. I really do. I think there was maybe a few moments, and we like talking about sliding doors moments on our podcast, where certain decisions, key moments just went against us. And you kind of think if you build up some momentum, which has been so critical and such a big part of McKenna's kind of arsenal to get us through the leagues, if we built some of that momentum up, maybe last season would have been more successful. But ultimately, Gab, I think we all give McKenna and the club a pass last season, knowing what we know now about the Premier League and how brutal it is. So clearly it's a different position for him now, because I don't think there was a huge amount of expectation when we came into the Championship 23-24. There, of course,
you both said ninth for me, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly right. So we were looking for a season of consolidation, and very quickly those ambitions pivoted. In the Premier League, apart from maybe a pocket of few Town fans who were thinking, we're going to repeat the heroics of 2000-2001 and finish 5th, which I don't think I ever envisaged, and probably Seb didn't either. It was a case of 17th, please. And there was times where you thought this is possible, this is on, and then the Premier League just steamrollers you. So with a different level of expectation in the Championship this coming season on McKenna, it'll be interesting to see how he copes. But the fundamentals, Gab, the preparation, the development, the consideration of leadership in particular areas, just generally being astute. I think we still have a huge amount of admiration for him, and the hope is that everything is in place to get us back to the Premier League this season.
Let's hope that's the case. Seb, is there a feeling from your point of view that anything could? I mean, I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think you're very conscious of the group that's won back-to-back promotions. From an outside perspective, I feel like it would have been very difficult to want to change too much of that and be too radical in how the club pivoted to approach the Premier League. Obviously, that in the end maybe was a factor, but I think it kind of makes sense to almost have that. It would have been difficult whichever route that you went down, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think internally decisions were clearly made that let's tool up now for 25, 26, because the momentum we gained from those double promotions was incredible. But the Premier League, compared to what it was when we were in it in 2002, when we last were relegated, it's moved on 100%. The physicality, the athleticism, the power, we were just so undercooked for it. And we kind of like to recruit diminutive, fast, quick, attacking midfielders. And there were games last year where they were just bouncing off centre halves and couldn't get anywhere near them. And that became the norm across the season. So whilst, yes, we probably should have looked at things slightly differently, you've got to, as Rich always mentioned, the FFP constraints with the set of League One accounts in our last 3 years. Mark Ashton was quite vocal and said, I can't put the club at risk. You can't just go out and sign someone who's played 300 games in the Premier League, because they're probably not going to want a relegation wage drop, etc. Mm-hmm. So you can't put the club at risk that way. We made that mistake 23 years ago, whenever it was. So the decisions made, I think, had one eye on this season, and that resulted in this, well, I've heard it called, Championship All-Stars quite a few times over the summer. That's the position we now kind of find ourselves in going into this season, and it was very much recruitment done with an eye. I mean, a lot of the signings in the January window were loans because, I think we knew what was coming, obviously, at that stage, and therefore it was right to give ourselves a fighting chance. And we were competitive in an awful lot of games. I could probably count on one hand the amount of times that we were destroyed by sides, the usual, like, City, Newcastle at home, Arsenal at home, that kind of thing. But despite being so competitive, we were still a million miles off it by the end of the season, and therefore decisions were made with an eye on this season and a look to bounce back at the very first attempt.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's have a look at the squad then. Rich, with the signing of David Button, who I imagine to come in with a bit of a view to a coaching sort of role, third choice keeper kind of thing, it does point me towards the possibility of some movement in the goalkeeping department. We obviously would expect Alex Palmer to be the number one goalkeeper after signing from West Brom in January. So I think it would be my prediction that two of Kieran Slicker, Iro Muric and Christian Walton will be offloaded either permanently or on loan.
It's a weird situation, Gab, because I wouldn't be shocked if another goalkeeper comes in. That's how.
You're joking? What?
Yeah, because I think you're right. Because I think Kieran Slicker needs to play football. He will not play football with Ipswich, so that's a season-long loan, 100% guaranteed. Iro Muric, I am in the minority who really likes the look of Muric. He had a few brain farts in the Premier League, but was massively hung out to dry and really became a scapegoat towards the latter end of last calendar year for a lot of our fans, quite unfairly. And with due respect to Palmer, who came in and had a really great debut and a really solid game away at Villa, which made the headlines. In terms of the skill set, there isn't a great deal between them, actually. Muric, I think, in certain circumstances, is probably a better all-round keeper. But sadly, the psychology around him, certainly himself, but around him in the stadium, just makes his position untenable, it's a really sad situation. So I'd be shocked if he's still here. So that's two keepers out the door. Christian Walton is at a really pivotal point in his career. I think he's 29, possibly. I think he's maybe 1 year left on his contract. Really excellent goalkeeper, really capable. Again, came in and didn't let anyone down in the Premier League. But is he going to want to sit on the bench for another season? It's 3 seasons in a row where he's not been the number one. Or do you want to try and find that move to set you up that, as a 29-year-old, as a goalkeeper, that's kind of you're coming into your peak years. Do you want to find a deal for 3 years, or do you want to stick around at Ipswich, get another promotion, but having sat on the bench for the majority of it? So there's a question mark for me about Christian Walton. You're spot on about David Button. It's a 1 year contract, but predominantly around coaching and mentoring the goalkeepers. We've got quite a lot of young goalkeepers who are coming through the academy, but won't be ready for first team football. So assuming there's 3 goalkeepers who potentially might not be here, that's why I suggest that maybe one comes in and Seb's been pretty consistent on this. I've tried to fight the corner of Iro Muric, but I'm kind of realizing it's a losing battle. So if Alex Palmer is on the undisputed number one, if I'm Christian Walton, I'm kind of thinking, fine, fair dues. I want to be number one. I've kind of been the understudy for far too long now. I'm going to find my move, in which case I think another keeper maybe comes in. But to your point, Gab, I think is Alex Palmer's shirt to lose.
Yeah, what do you think of Alex Palmer's form in the second half of last season, Seb?
He started really well. Villa away made some really big saves, and we were kind of all the talk amongst the fan base was, well, if we'd have signed him back in July, we might be further up the table with a few more points in our back pocket. I agree with Rich. Aro Muric, I think, is our best keeper from a stats point of view. It's noticeable the amount of set piece goals we conceded in the second half of the season. When he came out the side, kind of did drop off the side of a cliff, but too much has gone on. I don't think he can re-establish himself as the first choice. I think Palmer is an excellent player at this level. West Brom player of the season. I think it was in the championship team of the season a couple of years ago as well, wasn't he? The only concern I have with him, he does have the occasional brain fart, and the luck that he had was that they weren't punished in the same way that some of Muric's were. And his long kicking for me isn't great, needs a bit of work, but that, they can probably work on that over the summer. So I think he's very dependable, excellent at this level. But like Rich, if somebody were to come in, we've been linked with Carl Rushworth for the last 2 or 3 or 4 windows. If he was available, I could see the club having an argument to move for him to get it done with a view for further on down the line. But if we start with Alex Palmer as the number one on the first day at St Andrews, I haven't really got an issue with that.
That makes a lot of sense. Right, okay, that's interesting. But it's right because it sort of on the paper it looks like 5 goalkeepers already feels like a lot, but then works for mid-July as well. But maybe there's going to be
either right wingers or a goalkeepers, Gab. We are stockpiling the whole lot of them.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the defence then. Coming to you on this, Rich, you've got Harry Clark, who was on loan at Sheffield United last season, and you've got Ben Johnson, who came through the academy at West Ham. Clark obviously has the advantage, I suppose, of having been part of the promotion-winning squad from the year before. Do you think he would keep his place, or do you think another right-back could be coming in?
Yeah, I mean, it was Axel Tuanzebe's spot, the right back position, and he's obviously left to join Burnley on a free. Clark spent the latter half of last season on loan at Sheffield United and suffered quite a few injury situations, and that's been kind of punctuated his time with Town, actually quite a few injuries, and I think that makes him a little bit of a gamble. Again, supporters will probably read far too much into his brief appearances in the Premier League. His Premier League's first bow away at Brentford, conceded a penalty and got 2 yellow cards and was sent off within kind of about 15-20 minutes, if I remember rightly. I might have got that wrong, but he certainly was sent off and conceded a penalty. So but Johnson was played as a right midfielder too. So one of the links that we've got at the moment, and we're kind of going to do a show about this tonight on Blue Monday, Cedric Kipre is linked with a loan move to us from Ream, and the question is whether is he going to play right back or right centre back, because then Dara O'Shea might move out to the right hand side. I think that's kind of square pegs in round holes kind of situation there. So I think it's probably on the right hand side. The question is Ben Johnson the player we need if we moved him back into the kind of orthodox right back spot? And to be fair, at championship level, I think he's more than capable of doing that with Harry Clark probably as backup. But as always, Gab, there's always these kind of dilemmas, and pre-season usually tells you if Harry Clark is back fully fit and firing through pre-season, then I'd have no issues with him having that right back spot. But Ben Johnson is a player with value, and therefore you wonder whether if it's not him, are we going to sell him? So I would not be surprised, again, the debate about Kipre, where he plays, if someone comes in at right back.
Yeah, I mean, Seb, I suppose what you'd want, the advantage of having Harry Clark is the relationship, I think, with Leif Davis, in that Leif Davis kind of flies up and down the pitch, and Clark is a slightly more solid option, might step into midfield from time to time, but is much more about holding his ground a bit more and keeping the structure of the team in place. And so one thing I would be sort of apprehensive about is if you brought in a more attacking right back, or even, that might be Ben Johnson, does that compromise the balance of the team? It looks better because you've got width on both sides, but in the end you might not be as strong on defensive transitions, which had been one of your strengths in the promotion season.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. The back four is asymmetrical. So Leif Davis pushes right up, and it's the job of that right back, right centre half, whatever you want to call it, to provide a bit more stability and make it almost like a back three at times when Leif Davis is bombing on. And that's what Twanzebe did so well, because he was one of the few players able to step up to the Premier League from an athleticism point of view and a pace point of view. It was a position you didn't have to worry about. So interesting that Ben Johnson was never used there last season. I can't remember. It was either right wing back in the more defensive games or right of the three behind the striker in some away games where tracking back was required. I can't remember him starting at right back. I presume the position is probably his to kind of, take at the start of the season. Harry Clark is probably more attacking, but by the second half of the promotion season, Twanzebe nailed that spot down and it tightened up the right-hand flank. So Clark was kind of the right back for the first half of the promotion season, and then Twanzebe came in, which makes it clear McKenna wants that to be a more defensive role. Is Ben Johnson therefore more suited to that, given he's got more experience playing at a higher level? He's probably a little bit quicker as well, maybe a little bit more physical. I would suggest maybe he'll get the go from the start of the season.
The relationship there, Gab, that needs, you talked about the defensive line as a whole. Actually, the right back in McKenna's system desperately needs the support of the right winger, and Harry Clark has been fingers pointed at him because he's been left so exposed, and defenders have got him behind him because you're right, he's an attacking right back by trade. But is often left kind of outnumbered 2-for-1 if the winger doesn't drop in. And so the partnership he had with Wes Burns, certainly in League One and to an extent in the promotion season before Twanzebe came in, was really crucial. And I don't think we really nailed down that. We've kind of mentioned Ben Johnson there. We never saw Clark and Johnson play, I think, probably in the same team. So I think that's maybe the part of the conversation too, Gab, is who do we establish as the right winger? I think Hutchinson has played there. We'll talk about Ogbene, we'll talk about Clark possibly. Chaplin could play out there, Hutchinson could play out there. I think maybe it's figuring out the partnership down that side might be the key to figure out who gets that shirt.
Yeah, I think you want your fullback and wide player to have a good relationship. So if you've got Leif Davis at left back, you want the left winger to be somebody who cuts inside and can link up with that player. Whereas because Harry Clark, or possibly from what Seb was saying, Ben Johnson, are going to be more conservative in how they position themselves, you actually want the right winger to be dropping back a lot more, which probably feeds more into Wes Burns' games than necessarily somebody like Jaden Philogene, who's an unbelievable player.
I mentioned Philogene, did I?
Sorry, go on.
I didn't even mention Philogene when I was listing our right wingers. I told you we stockpile them.
Yes. Yeah, so I guess, you want that synergy between the wingers. So who do you think would be a good, would complement Clark, and who do you think would complement Johnson, if it's either of them?
I would pitch Burns again. I think we missed him. He got a really serious injury against Liverpool partway through the season, and I think we missed him. And of course, you get, we've seen the Trivella versus Coventry, and his cutback. He had two really great games against Coventry in 23-24, when he cut back the ball to Kiefer Moore on the penalty spot for the opening goal at the CBS Arena. So those things are in my mind, but he also does the dirty work. He also gets back in and drops in, has kind of established himself as quite a physical, a bit of a nasty player at times as well. Got a few yellow cards, a few naughty fouls. I remember opening day against Liverpool. Yeah, you kind of like that. But we've recruited Chie Ogbene, and I think he's got a role to play. He's coming back from injury too. I just think we never really got the opportunity, and these are kind of these marginal things that went against us last season to establish that. I think I would say if it's Clark, you want one of Burns or Ogbene, and if it's going to be Philogene or Hutchinson, you probably want Johnson.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's have a look at centre halves then, Seb, because you've got Dara O'Shea there and Jacob Greaves, who I think were probably two of your better players in the Premier League last season, most people would say. So I guess it makes sense to maybe not reinvent the wheel. If there's an area of the team that doesn't need much changing, then stick with those guys.
Absolutely, that'll be the first choice partnership. Dara O'Shea's just signed a new 4 or 5 year deal a couple of weeks ago. After Liam Delap and Amari Hutchinson, I would suggest he would have been the one to make a move back to the the Premier League, but the club clearly see him as a future leader. He was the captain when Sam Morsey wasn't involved at times last year. He's nailed on for that right centre back role. Luke Wolfenden will still be the backup to that slot. Obviously, Luke played the vast majority of the Championship season, but I think he's going to have to probably make do with being a squad player now. We're back down a level. Jacob Greaves is a funny one because he started the season so well, picked up a hamstring injury and was missing for a good few weeks and never really got back to the same kind of levels. He's got a lot of the attributes. He was in the Championship team of the season in 23-24 after his performances at Hull. He's left-footed, strong, decent, quick. But at times last year, he was bullied by ridiculously experienced Premier League players. So you can forgive him that one. McKenna likes that left foot, right foot balance. They will be the starting two. Wolfenden will provide the backup to the right-sided role. And then Cameron Burgess was the player who would come in at times last season when Greaves was injured, and he's moved on to Swansea on a free transfer, looking to play more football ahead of the World Cup because he wants to go to Australia next summer, and he simply wouldn't get ahead of Greaves, I don't think, this season. So it sounds like Cedric Kipre will be the kind of big, physical, dominant centre-half coming in. And in the promotion season 23-24, we would see George Edmondson come in at times for certain games. McKenna would clearly identify something, normally around either involving physicality, pace, or players cutting in on the opposition. He would bring in Edmondson for these bespoke kind of roles in that left-sided channel. So we might well see Kipre used like that next season at times when they need that bit of aerial dominance that Burgess would have provided in the past. But it's probably one of that and the attacking midfield is probably one area of the squad you could look at and think to yourself, those two are nailed on. Those two are really good, solid backups. We haven't got much to worry about in those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So one more centre half would be great, but certainly I think if you go into the season with Cedric Kipre, Jacob Greaves, Luke Wolfenden, and Dara O'Shea as your centre back options, I think you've done pretty well because those are very reliable defenders for this level. Rich, I wanted to ask you about Leif Davis because he was unbelievable in those back-to-back promotions. And I just wonder, Premier League didn't quite go as he'd hoped because there was a lot of talk about him before the Premier League season and maybe a little bit less talk about him afterwards. Do you think there's a danger that might have shaken his confidence and, maybe taken away some of the momentum in his career? Or are you very confident that he's going to go right back to being one of the top left-backs in the Championship?
I would hope that he reverts to type back in the Championship. It's worth noting, similar to Greaves, that Davis had kind of a season of two halves. I remember his goal against Leicester, his whipped ball against Brentford for Delap to score. There was still a really high amount of chance creation. We were just not able to convert them. Set pieces were a bit meh, but certainly towards the kind of latter stage of the season, there was a pretty horrendous sending off against Arsenal and a 3-game ban for that. Came back in. It kind of felt like at that point heads had dropped, and certainly his head had dropped, and it was just a case of, can we have the season over and done with, please, so I can just go back to it. His pace, his attacking creativeness, and I think his defensive sensibilities will be totally fine back in the Championship. Again, we could have talked about Harry Clark's moments where he's been left exposed. I think when I talked earlier about McKenna and whether there were question marks about some of his tactical choices last season, Davis was exposed quite a lot. Davis played the system that he was told to do and left a huge gaping chasm inside kind of Jacob Greaves on the left-hand side or Cam Burgess, whoever it was, which Premier League teams just kept exploiting. And again, a lot of the fingers were pointed quite unfairly at Davis, including on Match of the Day. Certain pundits on Match of the Day repeatedly pulled Leif Davis up, when actually I think he was doing what he was doing the previous season, and Premier League teams had just got wise to it. And it takes a brave footballer, he's still quite a young lad, to decide to not do what he's been told by someone like Kieran McKenna. So yeah, I think that's a situation where potentially we eventually addressed it by out of necessity because Davis was unavailable, by playing Greaves at left back and essentially having a centre back there who was not going to get so advanced. He was still caught out a few times, but that's the Premier League, as Seb mentioned. But I think back in the Champ, I fully expect Davis to hit the ground running again, and I think he benefits from just putting that season behind him. Focus on the positive. There were positives there. Use the learning experience and just, like a few of our team actually, just go again. And we've said it a few times, the Premier League, Gav, is just so relentless, so Like there is no quarter given, and any minute weakness is going to be exploited. That have analysed the crap out of us for the previous 3 weeks, probably have had people watching our games for probably the last 3 years. All of these kind of things, like players like Davis who are isolated, and that works really great in the Championship. It was a weakness in the Premier League, and so I think, yeah, hopefully if we go back, we figure out that situation. But for now, I've got full confidence in Davis, and Connor Townsend is a great deputy for him. He came in and had a few really solid appearances too, so I've got no problems with Connor Townsend.
Yeah, well, I think if Leif Davies does have that level of confidence, then hopefully he'll get back to that 23-24 form in the Championship very quickly. I think, Seb, I don't know if you'll agree with me this, but I think on current personnel, I think midfield is possibly the weakest area of Ipswich's squad in terms of if you look underneath the best 11. Because I think you've got Cam Humphreys, who did have a good loan spell at Wycombe Wanderers, although he played as a number 10 there. Also, whether he can do it sort of dropping deeper. You've got Sam Morsey, who was unbelievable in the back-to-back promotions, but there is once you get to a certain age, there are those kind of slight question marks. And then you've got Jack Taylor there, who can be really influential at this level as well. But I imagine at least one more midfielder is going to be coming in, and I think you're after Jens Kajista, who you had last season.
Yeah, I think this is, when you look at the squad, this is the obvious area that needs work. I think we need at least two. Obviously, last year we had Jens Kajus on loan from Napoli. That is in danger of becoming a saga this summer, dare I say now. There are links of him going elsewhere on loan and being cancelled because we're showing an interest again. So that has been going on now for about the last 2 months or so since the season ended. Calvin Phillips obviously went on loan last year. Has gone back to Man City. Could never get him going fitness-wise and was never going to stay once we were relegated. And we've released Massimo Luongo. So you've lost three kind of experienced bodies in that central midfield position. So we only have the three that you've just mentioned. Cam Humphreys coming off the back of a successful loan at Wycombe, but as you say, not playing in a central midfield position. I think he probably played 2 or 3 games in the promotion season, and maybe from left back. I can't remember him starting in central midfield on too many occasions. So it's a big ask for him to come in and kind of step up. I think he'll be involved in and around the squad, but merely as a squad player playing in EFL Cup games and maybe providing a bit of relief to that left fullback kind of role. Jack Taylor has never really done it since joining us 2 summers ago. He will show moments of absolute quality. He's got a hell of a strike on him from 30 yards, but he's never been able to get in the side and dislodge either Luongo in the Championship season or last year. He started a few games here and there, but as soon as Kajus, Morsey, Phillips were fit, they would kind of go back to being the first things on the team sheet. So the club have a decision to make there going into the last year of his contract. Is he one you look to simply reduce to being a squad player as he's been for the last few years, or do you look to try and get a bit of money in for him? And then Sam Morsey, obviously Mr. Dependable. You said fantastic for those 2 back-to-back promotions seasons. Absolutely. Did okay at times last year as well. You've got to remember the level of players he was going up against was just crazy. Some of those Premier League midfield powerhouses, there was no disgrace to be overrun at times last season. But he is 34 now, I think, going into the new season. He lives his life incredibly dedicated in terms of his off-field behaviour and diet and all that kind of stuff. So I think fitness-wise, he should be absolutely fine. But it's an area we do need arrivals. We are apparently pretty close to signing Azor Matasuwa. I'm going to go with. I probably absolutely butchered that. He's likely to come in from the French league. It seems as though our kind of scouting network has improved to the continent. So it sounds like a double deal with him and Cedric Kipre is pretty imminent. That's one great. He'll become our record buy in central midfield at 9-10 million pounds or so. So that's a great start. But I still think we need one more in there to kind of be a long-term successor for Sam Morsey and to provide the cover that you need when you're playing the Saturday-Tuesday schedule that we've kind of not had for the last year being in the Premier League. Flynn Downs is always a name that gets linked with us. We let him go 4 years ago, was it now, to Swansea in the Demolition Man summer, kind of got his move to West Ham, never really settled. Went to Southampton, was excellent against us at Portman Road in the crazy 3-2 Jeremy Sarmiento 97th minute winner. By all accounts, we wanted him the summer a year ago. We wanted him in the January window and couldn't get it done. And McKenna does like to go back in for players, so I wouldn't be that surprised if he's very high on the list. And If he comes in along with Matisuwa, probably butchered it again, then I think we'll be okay with Taylor as a squad player, Morsey as your captain, your Mr. Dependable, and Cam Humphreys contributing. But it's definitely an area where at least 2 new arrivals are needed.
Rich, Sam Morsey, is there a possibility that you're looking at 10 to 15 league starts from next season, and there's an idea of keeping him fresh for bursts and not necessarily expecting him to start sort of every week and be that player that you build the team around at 34, because there is that question mark over him in terms of the intensity perhaps at this stage of his career, even though he is a fantastic professional, as Seb mentioned.
Yeah, I think inevitably you can do all the great things off the field, and I just time catches up with everyone, doesn't it? Eventually, and sure. If I'm honest, I think Seb alluded to it. If the Matt Usiwa, I think we're going with, deal gets done, I think he's a right-sided defensive midfielder, and I think he's very much the Morsey Mark II. So I think when it's a combination of or a competition for places on that right central midfield spot, I think it's between those two, and therefore if you're spending 9 million quid, if that's the reported fee, then more often than not I'd expect Matt Usiwa to, have I got it right? Matt Usiwa, I think so, to start, and I think that's inevitable. And I think the trouble is that Morsey brings so much leadership and setting of standards. I think that's again, to hark back to the marginal moments or the things that went against us, the likes of Smodic, Chaplin, Burgess, Luongo, who bring that character, who bring that leadership, just weren't around Morsey last season enough in the squad to bring that leadership and kind of having the right conversations on the field when things were going against us. Mm-hmm. And therefore you kind of feel like if Morsey's physically up to it, you need him for being the great captain, the great leader that he is, rather than anything else. But my worry, Gab, is that we underestimated the Premier League. I think the Championship might have moved on as well. There's a lot of really excellent teams. I think a lot of Premier League clubs have had the experience of coming up, or maybe seen the experience of Ipswich and Sheffield United, Leicester and Southampton, and the kind of challenges that we had week in, week out, and thought, oh, okay, if we're going to get promoted, then we kind of need to address that now as well. So I think Championship level recruitment has gone up a level too, in which case the battles are often lost in the centre of the park, and it's an area where I don't think we can really take a huge amount of risk. So Morsey will absolutely have a role to play, but I think you're right. I don't think it's a 46 game season for him.
No, I think that's sensible. Seb, I think the big burning question on everyone's lips at Ipswich Town this summer is whether Amari Hutchinson is going to stay at Portman Road. What's your gut instinct on that one?
My gut is that he will move on. There are rumours of a £35 million release clause. Obviously, we saw Liam Delap go for 30 million quid. He's currently off. He's enjoying having won the under-21 Euro Championship with England. So he's off having a well-deserved break. But the rumours, I think, started yesterday. There was a Spurs account that was mentioning that he had links with Thomas Frank is after him. And there was also rumours that West Ham receiving the money for Kudos might look at him. And he's probably in a bracket where he could go to a Brentford, West Ham,
Palace,
an Everton, maybe kind of a Palace, a kind of a Premier League side that can almost drip feed him in a little bit, because we've got to remember he's only played 2 seasons of men's football. The Championship loan with us was his first season. Last year he started an awful lot of games, and the numbers don't back up how good he is. Last season I think he got 3 goals and maybe 1 or 2 assists, and you look at those numbers and you think, okay, well, he's not good enough for that level. But when you see him for the England under-21s and you put him around better players, he's a great player, and I think his ceiling is incredibly high, and I think he will probably move on. Hopefully it won't go late in the window. It's going to happen. Hopefully it will happen before the start of the season, but he's one with an incredibly high ceiling, and my gut does say he won't be here next season. If he is, I think he's a cheat code at this level. He was the best attacking player in the Championship for the second half of our promotion season. There were games he was almost winning single-handedly. He played more on the right-hand side on the promotion campaign. Last year, until the injuries happened to Burns and Ogbene, he was very much centre in the 10. But there were times last year where 2 years ago, when Championship left-backs were noticeably just retreating in fear when he picked the ball up on the halfway line because they couldn't stop him. He was so effective. And yeah, if we can retain him, well, you're looking at probably a 20 goal, 15 assists player because he is that good. But I think one of the bigger boys will pinch him. He'll probably go and pay 20, 25 games for them and continue his own development elsewhere, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully the club can reinvest that money wisely if that is to be the case, which then leaves, I suppose, for the 10 role, Rich, we're looking at Connor Chaplin, who obviously starred in the promotion winning season in 23-24. What have you seen anything in the Premier League to kind of dissuade you from thinking that he's going to replicate that kind of form?
It's difficult to know with Chaplin. Again, one of these leaders, great characters, a really influential member of the dressing room through the promotion campaigns. But if I'm being brutally honest, I think the Premier League was a level beyond him. And that's not to say that he can't do it. And he just didn't get the run of games to be. He had a really long injury over Christmas and New Year, which didn't help him. But I think one of the things where Chaplin excels and does this better than most players that I've seen in recent years is the defense splitting pass, or he finds an angle. I mean, we know he's a fox in the box. His combination with Leif Davis at set pieces was a really important tool, and for us, certainly the Sunderland game springs to mind where we had a stuttering run of form, and he scored the winning goal against Sunderland on a Saturday night on the telly from a Leif Davis free kick, and so we know that he's got goals in him at Championship level, so there's no issue there. I think the big challenge for him is trying to contribute when things aren't going your way. And for me, there are times where he'll try the Hollywood pass. He'll try to spring someone in behind, a Hurst or a Delap in behind. It doesn't come off. And it's like, okay, well, what else are you going to bring to the party? Are you going to initiate the high press? Are you going to try and drop deep and start things? And when things don't go his way in the Prem, maybe his head went a little bit as well, which is understandable. I keep saying the word brutal. It's a brutal league. The debate, Gab, really is whether Sam Smodic slots over the central role, having been on the left-hand side. We could have talked about, will we recruit or bring in players if Hutchinson were to go? But you look at the options that we've got on both the right and the left-hand side. I think the question mark is who plays 10. I think Chaplin more than capable to play 10 in the Championship. The question is whether you get more out of Smodic by playing him centrally. And then you bring Jack Clark in, even Jaden Philogene played on the left-hand side for some of the games last season. And then you've got Burns and Ogbene down the right-hand side. That to me is quite well balanced. And you've got 2 players for each position. So that would be where my head is at. And then in which case, if it's a choice between Smodic and Chaplin, sadly for Connor Chaplin, you've got to play Smodic because he's almost a cheat code player like Hutchinson, isn't he, off his Blackburn season the year before?
Yeah, and also I think with Smodic, he's got that ability to go beyond the striker as well, because he's the willing runner, and has got that energy about him, which might create space as well for those wide players to kind of cut inside and do that damage. I wanted to ask you, Seb, a similar player to Chaplin, I suppose, in Nathan Broadhead, another one who had a fantastic season in the Championship and has maybe found opportunities hard to come by because of the recruitment the following summer. Do you see Broadhead being part of Kieran McKenna's plans, or do you see a bit like Chaplin, him possibly falling behind against maybe a slightly more favourable option?
I think there's a lot of traffic in front of him playing that left-hand role. You mentioned earlier about the role of that left behind of a 3, the left 10, we like to call them, is to cut inside onto your right foot to create shooting opportunities and to drag the defence away to create the space for Leif Davis to bomb on to the touchline and put balls across. So Nathan Broadhead was signed in the January of the League One promotion season, clearly far too good for that level. In the Championship, he was our joint top scorer with Chaplin with 13 goals. And then he didn't really feature for the first half of last year at all. I think he picked up an injury in pre-season. And then he got a little run around Christmas and would then kind of be kind of put in and out. He's always been a player that does better at Portman Road, I would say, than away. But we look at those left-sided positions now. You know, you've got Jack Clark, who is exceptional at this level. It's probably Jaden Philogene preferred position. He might have to play on the right, given the injury to Wes Byrne. He's not going to be around till Christmas, and Ogbene coming back from an injury. And then you just mentioned Smodic. So he's got a lot of traffic ahead of him. He might be one the club look to kind of cash in on. He's going into the last year of his contract, links inevitably with Wrexham up here, being a North Wales kind of lad. So he could well be one that moves on. I wouldn't be surprised if the club do look to get a bit of money for him.
With the League Grant connection, I could possibly see that.
Yeah, potentially, absolutely. But at that level, he's a cheat code. I think he can certainly do a job for a Championship side. It's just when you look at the likes of Jack Clark, Jaden Philogene, possibly Sammy Smodic ahead of him, is he going to be happy to kind of be a bit part player and play the EFL Cup games and then feature for maybe, you know, half a dozen games a season? I'm not sure. I think he'll want to play and therefore would probably move on. And then it's one of those sad scenarios again where one of the double promotion heroes is moving on, but it's just an inevitable part of football and an inevitable kind of evolution of the squad as we've moved forward.
Jack Clark, Rich, I mean, it feels like dangerous to sort of say Championship All-Stars, but Jack Clark is a player who it feels like every time he ever plays at Championship level, he's always one of the top players in that division. And he'd actually started out as a right winger for Leeds United, but more recently he's been converted into a left winger who can cut inside onto his right foot, which is exactly what you want to do when you're on the same flank as Leif Davis.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Jack Clark, and last season he's one of these players that almost had his like exploded on the scene, to quote Mika Richards. This
burst onto the scene.
Thank you. There's this game at Fulham which is still like a part of my nightmares, where Clark runs basically the length of the pitch, goes past two players and slams a shot off the post, which they then take the ball from the rebound and then go and win a penalty up the other end and deny us a win where we would have got 2 wins on the bounce. There were moments of brilliance in there in the Championship that just didn't come off for him, in the Premier League, sorry, that just didn't come off for him. Again, defensively, not necessarily trusted by certain parts of the fan base, but if you are not going to be the second favourite every week like we're in the Prem, then you can definitely find space for a Jack Clark in your team. And I'm interested with maybe him as a right-sided option, perhaps, but I think McKenna loves to, as Seb said, the players cutting in, and we absolutely know that Jack Clark can do that. I got a few goals last season, but it'd be great if he started the season left side 10, scored scored at Birmingham and just gets himself up and running, because it feels like he just needs a bit of a confidence boost. And as I said, I've got a huge amount of time for him. I'm a big fan of Jack Clark, and I just hope that I'm not cursing him like I appear to have cursed Aro Muric.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think there's more to come from Jaden Philogene, Seb, because I think what's really curious for me is that whereas Jack Clark has that kind of, I guess, pedigree of being a top-end Championship player, I think Philogene doesn't have quite that same CV, but I think he's shown moments, I think, in his career so far where he can be extremely skillful and creative, and he had some outstanding moments at this level for Hull City, but it's just been curtailed a little bit by injury. But I think there's a lot more to come from Jaden Philogene.
Yeah, I agree. We kind of pursued him this time last year as part of a double deal with Jacob Greaves. We have agreed fees for both of them, and he was due to join us. Villa then swooped and took him back there before eventually selling him to us in the January window. And he never really got going. You know, he kind of couldn't nail down a position because he was needed at times on the right with the injury to Wes Burns and Chio Ogbene. So he was filling in there. It's clear, I think, his favourite position is that left-sided 10 cutting in on his right foot. You know, that's what he wants to be doing. I would agree with you when you say, you know, he hasn't got the CV necessarily of a Jack Clark. But I'm really excited to see what he can do this season, because McKenna has clearly identified key attributes and key traits in him that he wants to work with, and it's just a case of where will he fit in. He got injured away at Chelsea, and that was his season kind of done. I think he probably made maybe a dozen appearances for us, scored twice actually at Old Trafford, but has never really kind of won over the fan base. And it'll be really interesting on the first day of the season when we walk out at St Andrews. He might well have a job to do in that right-sided role if he's back fit again. And then he's a case of, will he be kind of having to sacrifice some of his own numbers to do a job for the team, or is he able to get himself in a more natural position where he can really look to influence games? I'm excited for him. You know, he is our record buy after Amari Hutchinson. I think we spent £20 million on him, so clearly it's a player they want to develop and look further. And yeah, seeing what he did with Hull a couple of years ago, he could provide some great moments at this level, but I think he just needs to nail down that position and get a decent run in the side.
Yeah, that's the one thing with Jaden Philogene, Rich. He's not a Wes Burns, and I suppose that's kind of more what you're looking for on that right hand side in terms of the balance of the team. So yeah, I'm wondering where he's going to fit in. I think Seb makes an excellent point in terms of he's definitely got the ability, but is there going to be a place for him in this system, or can he produce the numbers where he kind of makes a place for him and the team has to adapt to him?
Yeah, and the McKenna approach, we didn't really see too much of this last season, has always been to have starters and finishers in the squad. And maybe there's a role for Philogene as a finisher. You know, Burns or Ogbene is tired of the opposition left back. You know, both Burns and Ogbene can be physical as well, so they can rough them up. And then you unleash Philogene down the right hand side. You know, I think that's maybe he won't like that situation because he's a marquee player, isn't he? And maybe Clark is similar. There's some real dilemmas for McKenna there. What I would say for both Clark and Philogene, which, you know, similar to what I've talked about when it comes to Davis and Chaplin, where you kind of felt like these are players who've been top end in the Championship and just kind of look around them and go, what the hell have I got to do to succeed at Premier League level? There is a psychology, and maybe I'm judging from afar, but both Clark and Philogene feel like confidence players, and they just don't have that at the moment. And McKenna's man management is excellent, and so you fully expect arms round shoulders. And I've got a view for how your role is going to, you know, how you're going to excel in this team, so you can give them confidence that way. But eventually, to your point, Gab, you've got to get them on the pitch. You've got to get them getting assists and goals, and it's not necessarily easier said than done in when you've got so much strength and depth that we currently have.
Absolutely. Seb, I'm wondering about George Hurst, because I think there's you speak to Ipswich fans about him in his role in certainly the promotion from the Championship, and there's a feeling that he was absolutely fantastic that season with his work ethic and hold-up play. And it feels like now the conversation around George Hurst is a bit more lukewarm, perhaps, if that's the right word, where he's had a difficult time of things in the Premier League, and there's a feeling that you'd be perfectly okay with him starting away at St Andrews on the opening night. But also there's a feeling that if you can sign that extra number 9 who could be a bit more of a difference maker, that, you know, you'd be open to that.
It's definitely an area where we do need to add a body. I love George Hurst, Gab. Yeah, he gave us an amazing moment away at Barnsley as we closed in on the League One promotion season. The work he did for the first 6 months of the Championship promotion season was excellent. He finished with 6 goals and 6 assists by Christmas time. He then tears his hamstring and is out for pretty much all of the season, only coming back into the last 3. And in a Kieran McKenna side, last season apart, when Liam Delap was scoring all the goals and taking all the headlines, it's the front player's job to create space, to tire defenders out, to allow those 3 behind him to really carve out the better shooting opportunities. And for that, he is absolutely excellent at this level. He's just signed a new 4-year contract, so the club are clearly, you know, standing behind him. And the only question mark you would have over him, from my point of view, is the injuries. He had the hamstring tear against Leicester. I think a lot of that might have been brought around through overplaying. We didn't secure a second striker in that window of the summer 2023, so Hurst was pretty much being flogged for probably longer than anyone would have liked to, week in, week out. As we know, the Championship schedule is relentless. Picked up a hamstring injury in pre-season last year, came back away at Spurs, had a nasty impact injury, and then kind of missed a couple of months as well. But even last year, his goal involvement based on starts was still really impressive. I think it was 3 goals in the Premier League, 2 more in the FA Cup, couple of assists. By the end of the season, when all the noise was coming out about Liam Delap moving on, Hurst started a few games on the bounce. And yeah, I have no issue if he is our starting striker, but the crucial thing will be to manage him with a suitable backup to take his place at 70 minutes, 75 minutes when his race is run. We currently have Ali Al-Hamadi as the backup. He had a few games in the Premier League last season, looked way off it, but to be fair, the guy was playing League Two football with AFC Wimbledon in winter 2023, January 2024. So that's not necessarily his fault. It's an area we need somebody to come in, but I have no issue personally if George Hurst starts 35 games next season, as long as he gets that rest when he needs it and we're not flogging him and making the mistake we made probably last year and maybe at times, certainly at times in the Championship promotion season.
Rich, is there a feeling that Ali Al-Hamadi might just need a loan, possibly a top-end League One loan, just to build his confidence up a little bit, and maybe Ipswich could dip into the loan market for another striker to offer that competition as backup to George Hurst? Or do you see it that Al-Hamadi, you might bring in a second striker, but Al-Hamadi could be the third choice option just to give you that bit of cover in case it's required?
Yeah, it's a good question, Gab. I think either of those scenarios are plausible right now. I wouldn't be shocked though if we sell him. I'm just not sure. The loan at Stoke last season, I think he had some good moments. I think did he score about 5 goals? Seb, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but was it only a couple? Was it? I thought he got.
I think it was only a couple of gols. Yeah, the fans took to him very quickly. Did he score on his debut? Maybe
he did score on his debut.
And
okay,
the fans took to him, but I don't think he pulled up any trees.
I think the club will have seen that and thought, okay, well, at the very least, our ambition at the moment is top end Championship to Premier League, and therefore it's just one of those situations. He's really unfortunate in terms of timing. If the 9th place position, Gab, that we'd speculated about 2 years ago for Town had come to fruition, then Ali Al-Hamadi plays much more football, I think, and has the whole of last season playing the Championship potentially.
He'd probably develop at a more sustainable rate, wouldn't he, Rich?
Exactly right. And therefore the fact that hasn't happened, to Seb's point, which is spot on, it's not his fault. He's just Ghassan Ahadmi is the same situation. 2 strikers that we brought in, probably with an element of we've got to bring extra positions in, extra players in around our starting striker, and we've probably, if you're looking for a criticism of Ashton and our recruitment team, we have failed routinely in transfer windows. The one exception was bringing in Kiefer Moore in the last half of the 23-24 season, when finally we've got a physical presence, a goal scorer, a sure thing striker comes in rather than a development player or a prospect. So I think there's maybe a difficult decision, just because Al-Hamadi is a really likable guy, works really hard, just maybe isn't the level that we need right now, and therefore maybe his career is best served by finding a move bottom end Championship, or to your point, a season long loan at League One for a top, a Huddersfield potentially with League One. That wouldn't be a surprise if there's a few more players to point earlier, Gab, end up working for him. So again, it feels really harsh and really, quite overly critical of Al-Hamadi, but it isn't. It's just a circumstances just haven't played out for him.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, Seb, are we looking at, at the moment, I've got another 4 or 5 additions to come in, do you think?
Yeah, if we assume the 2 rumours seem close with Cedric Kipre, that takes care of the centre halves, 1 midfielder. So we definitely need another midfielder, and I think we need a backup striker. If we assume these 2 are done, that's 4 in total. The goalkeeper situation will work itself out naturally. So yeah, assuming those 2 haven't been done yet, you're looking at 4 to 5. 2 should be ticked off pretty imminently, and then I think we'll spend some good money on another central midfielder, and then getting an important kind of backup rotation option with George Hurst up front is pretty critical. And then you might look to do, if you want your right-sided centre half to be a certain type, then maybe you could look at doing something there, but it's not a pressing necessity like the midfield and like the rotation striker options are.
The difference for this season, though, is that we've got 5 loans that we can take, whereas last year, at least domestic loans, it was 2 last season. So now we've got, if a Premier League team, and Premier League teams, let's be clear, have seen what Kieran McKenna has done over the last few seasons. That's why Amari Hutchinson came to the club. Liam Delap, I guess, trusted his career for a season with Kieran McKenna. Teams know that they'll be nurtured and looked after, and therefore you wonder whether a couple of high prospect loans, maybe on the right-hand side of defence, Gab, maybe even in central midfield alongside a couple of permanent signings, perhaps. So that is an extra bit of flexibility that we didn't have last season that maybe we'll exploit this season.
Yeah, I think you're in a great position to get, for the top prospects in the country that want a good sort of start in the Championship. I think you've put yourselves in a great position to get those with Kieran McKenna's work. Expectations then really feels quite odd, doesn't it, to be talking about Ipswich Town as a favourite at Championship level. Probably hasn't been the case for, I reckon, 20 odd years. Do you think, Seb, that from a fan point of view, do you set top 6 as the minimum expectation and top 2 as the target, or is top 2 the minimum expectation?
There are ways to finish in the top 6, aren't they? If you look at the promoted sides last year, Burnley and Leeds get 100 points apiece. Sheffield United just miss out finishing 3rd, but it's still a 90-plus point season. That can happen, obviously. I think top 3 is without question the target, and you just got to make sure you're on the right side of it on the last day of the season when it all ends, to make sure you're up automatically. That can be winning it, that can be second. I'm not bothered about either of those two things. It's just crucial to get back to the Premier League as quickly as possible. That's what we didn't do 23 years ago, whenever it was. We messed it up. We had a solid squad back then. We messed it up, and then eventually, players leave, bigger boys come and pinch your star talents, and you inevitably fall back into decline. So bouncing back is absolutely crucial. It sounds weird because we've done podcasts, we've spoken on here about how unenjoyable the Premier League is, and yet for the next 9 months we will be going into every single game solely focused on winning it to ensure we get back there as quickly as possible, because it's where the club needs to be. It's a really strange world, because it's not enjoyable as a fan, but you kind of want to be back there as quick as you possibly can. So a weird dichotomy for the fan base to kind of get used to. For me,
the reward is the promotion. The reward,
it is
exactly. Yeah, I think they said that at times. I think people said the journey is way better than the destination.
Oh yeah,
and that proves to be the case. Clearly, it's going to be a very competitive league next year. I think a lot of people look at what we did in 23-24 and assume that this squad is much better than that one. Therefore, this should be quite straightforward. I don't succumb to that. The Championship, as we know, over the years, is capable of throwing up ridiculous results. We've got new blood kind of coming into it in terms of Birmingham's investments. Wrexham are now in it. There are many, many potential banana skins, and we're still going head to head with Southampton and Leicester as parachute sides, and Sheffield United as a parachute side. And you've got 4 parachute sides straight away. You've got Birmingham with clear aspirations. You've always got the likes of Coventry, who kind of trade well and will be a threat. Swansea, paying decent money, they will be a threat. And only 3 of these clubs can go up. So McKenna will talk about being humble. It's important as a fan base. We are equally as humble. We need to get off to a good start. We've lost an awful lot of games of football in the last 12 months. Only seen 1 win at Portman Road, only seen 4 wins overall. It's crucial to flick that. It might not be that easy to do, but we need to flick that quickly. And we haven't got an easy start either on the Friday night. So top 2 for me clearly has to be the objective. That's what they'll be talking about in the club, regardless of what they're saying to the media and outside. That what has to be the media, the expectations. But it's crucial to get off to a good start. I'll be honest, if you offered me a point now at St Andrews on that Sky game, I'd probably take it and look to build with the home game against Southampton following.
I wouldn't mind doing a deal. I don't know if it works like that, but I'll do a deal with you. So, gents, as you know, I'm doing my 1 to 24 predictions this month. And one of my processes for doing that this year is to rate each team out of 10 on 14 different categories that I think are going to determine their fate. So what I'm going to do is shout a category at you, and you can give me a number between 1 and 10. First category is ownership.
9, isn't it, Seb?
Do you alternate? Do you do 1 each? You go this one, I'll go next.
I'll go 9, Gab.
9 for ownership. Seb, infrastructure is the next one.
8, we're improving things, but it's not quite there yet.
8 for infrastructure. Playing budget.
For a 10.
The
Gotta be 10.
championship level, yeah, makes sense. Management.
842. As high as you can possibly make it. 10 out of 10 with it's a complete no-brainer. He's the best manager outside of the Premier League.
He's done it. 842.
Down the 842. Yeah.
Does that mean we win your 1 to 24 by default? Just out. It's Kieran McKenna, isn't
it? Rich, the goalkeeping unit.
8, I think.
Seb, defence.
9.
9 for the defence. Midfield.
As of today, I'd probably say 7. I don't know if Seb's going to challenge me on that one, but I think we're light on numbers, certainly starters, and that's the problem there. So the quality is there, but it's not in depth. So 7.
Attack.
Well, we've just listed the names, haven't we? It's ridiculous. I'd say it has to be a 9.
9 for the attack. Squad depth, Rich.
I'll go 8. I think it's generally good, but I think there are areas where we're a bit light. So 8 pushing 9, I'd say.
8 for now, relative to this stage of the window, it is.
Yeah, I think so. If we get the 4 players that Seb talks about, then it's a 9, but 8 for now.
Okie dokie. Squad stability.
Well, we're seeing a bit of turnover, but we've got an awful lot of the players that were there for the last couple of years, and obviously signing those Championship All Stars last year. I mean, they've got a year to bed in, so I'd probably go 8 again.
8 for squad stability. Growth potential, Rich.
I think it's a good age squad as well. I'd say almost say 9 at the moment. We are bringing in the targets that we're linked with are much. They're 28. I think Kipre might be 28, 27, I think. So I think we're addressing a little bit of a lack of leadership and experience, but a big majority of the squad are 23, 24, and even younger. So I'd say 9.
9 for growth potential. Team spirit, Seb.
It will have taken a battering last year. There's no denying that, and that's what I said about a minute ago about needing to flip that switch to pull it back again. I'll go for a 7 with that one, simply because of how brutal the Premier League was. And obviously, with a couple of wins, the first 2 games of the season, that shoots straight back up, doesn't it?
Of course. Fitness, Rich.
Yeah, difficult one. There are a few key players that will pull up with injuries. Hurst, Burns. We are doing a bit of off-field recruitment around that situation. I don't know about you, Seb. I think I might go 7 there, purely because the depth is being addressed, but there are risky areas where key players might go down again injured, and we might be limited, I guess. So 7. Hopefully we address it, Gab.
Yeah, that's a big area to invest in the sport.
And not being in the Prem would help. I think Premier League athleticism is just a totally different level.
Yeah. Quality, Seb.
Oh, it's got to be a 9, hasn't it? You know, the names we've reeled off, it's scary, some of those names. So, 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10 for quality. There you have it. So some final quick-fire questions from me, gents, before we wrap up. Biggest reason to believe in Ipswich Town?
Kieran McKenna.
I knew you were going to say that. do you same answer, Rich?
I can't do anything better than that. Yeah.
Biggest reason for doubt?
Last season. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And finally, maybe too early for a prediction, but give me a feel for where next season might be heading for Ipswich Town.
You do it, Rich, because I did the prediction a minute ago, so this one's for you. Go on.
I would be disappointed if we're not in the top 6, put it that way. And I think Seb called it right. The expectation in most places will be automatics. I don't buy into that. I think the Championship's a really challenging league. I think Seb's right. Start well. We could do exactly the same as what we did last time. Start slow and it's a challenge. But I think the quality is just too good in terms of what we've got there at our disposal, that even if we make that shaky start, you can rotate and bring in that quality, and other teams won't have that at their disposal. So one way or the other, we'll find a way to make it work, Gab, and the McKenna factor is crucial. So I'm saying at least top 6, put it that way.
Interesting. It's a bit more conservative than I was expecting.
That's my way, though. I'm more. If you ask Seb or other members of our podcast team, they'll be predicting 2nd or 1st. That's not my. It's not my style.
Seb, final word for you. Top 2 is the aim, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I think we will finish second. It's tend to be what we do. We didn't win the League One, the promotion season. We didn't win the Championship that season. So I think second, and yeah, that has to be the level of expectation, given the fact we are now a parachute club, given the fact we've got all these players, given the fact we've got that man in the dugout. It has to be the aim.
Great stuff. Rich, Seb, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Great to get your insight on Ipswich Town. Everyone go subscribe to the Blue Monday podcast as well. You can also subscribe to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify for more of our content. And we'll see you again for another Summer Deep Dive very soon.